What is up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be talking all about vinyl, and I have a lovely vinyl by the Platters here, and I'm going to be discussing whether or not it's a good idea to sample from vinyl. I'm going to go through the pros and cons and talk about some of the purist ideas and the not so purist ideas surrounding sampling and where you get your music from. So my aim in this video is to be really balanced, because I don't really belong in either camp. I'm not a purist that samples from vinyl all the time, and I'm not someone that disagrees with sampling from digital platforms either. So hopefully because of that I can give a really balanced opinion about what I think in regards to sampling from vinyl. So you might want to sit down, grab a cup of coffee, grab a drink, grab a smoke for this one, because it's basically just going to be me talking into the camera. I'll put some B-roll over the top to make things a little bit more interesting, but this is purely a discussion based video. There's not going to be any practical elements in this one, just to let you know before this one starts. Okay, so let's dive into the wonderful world of vinyl, and what are the arguments for sampling from vinyl? Well, first of all, I think the most obvious one is that authentic sound that you get when you sample from a vinyl record. There is no way you can match that, even with all the effects that we have access to, especially with the SP devices and our DAWs. You just can't quite emulate that sound, that warm, rich sound that you get from sampling from a record. And added to that as well, that authentic crackle that you get from those old, worn-out records. You just can't emulate that, even with the vinyl simulators that you get on the SP. So to start off with, I think that's the most important thing to note probably about sampling from vinyl, is that it's really good in the sense that you're going to get a top quality sound, and it's going to be completely authentic and sound absolutely amazing compared to digital samples. Secondly, just look at vinyls. They're absolutely amazing things to own. You get a 12-inch piece of artwork that can be really nice to have in your room or in your beat making lab or in your studio. These can be put up on shelves on full display and really add some colour and character to your room. So this is just one that I've already mentioned, the Platters Now. I mean, I love this front cover. The artwork is so strong, the white suits against the blue, and on the back as well we've got some other information that we can read about. More often than not as well, you get sleeves inside here which have more information, and this is probably quite a vanilla front cover. You can get some really crazy artwork on these. So another reason why I think having vinyl and sampling from it is really cool is just that you get access to this unbelievable artwork. And to be honest, if I don't have access to listen to something before I buy it at a record store, I usually base my purchase solely off what the cover looks like. So if it really grabs my eye, it's probably going to land the purchase. I just love looking for those crazy old covers and purchasing based on those. I think that's a really fun way of picking what vinyl to buy. Okay, probably one of the most important things to note is that this will be something you hear a lot, especially in the beat making community, that vinyl is the purest and correct way to sample to make beats. And whilst I do agree with this to a certain extent, I don't think it discounts digital sampling completely. Those purists that talk about sampling from vinyl all the time, there's no way they haven't touched digital samples. I mean, imagine trying to take vinyl with you on holiday, for instance. It's just not going to happen, is it? So the purists at either end of the spectrum are the ones that usually shout the loudest, but I think from my personal experience is that everyone these days, just because of the ease of digital sampling, is going to be using it. But going back to the original point, it is definitely the traditional way to make beats, is to dig through records, dig through record shops, find records, sample from them and flip them to make beats. So although there are alternatives now which are much easier to use, I still do think that yes, sampling from vinyl is the proper and traditional way to make hip hop. Okay, the last point that I've got as a pro for sampling from records is that the feeling of it is just so rewarding when you go to a record shop, dig through the crates, find a bargain, bring it home, you listen through the record, and sometimes you find one, two, sometimes you can find up to 3 or 4 different samples to flip on the same record. And I have to say that that is an extremely satisfying feeling. When you've gone to all that effort and you get home and you make a banger off wax, it does feel amazing. So that's probably one of the best things about vinyl, I think, is because it's kind of like a lucky dip in a way, and when you do land on a hot sample, it's just absolutely amazing feeling. Put that in your SP or your MPC or whatever device you use, even your computer, flip that, and yeah, that's just such a good feeling. It's really satisfying. Okay, so for this second part, I've got a different vinyl. This is Boys Night Out, First Circle. Absolutely love the artwork on this one. Really good stuff. And the back as well has got some amazing photos. So that's what I'm saying about the artwork that you can pick up. There's some really cool stuff around if you do dig. And in this section, obviously, I'm going to talk about the downsides of sampling from vinyl. So let me just put this down out the way. The first thing that I'd point out probably is that if you are going to take the time to sample from vinyl, then it literally is going to take time. It's going to take a lot of your time compared to being able to sit at home and use a laptop or even your phone to find records to sample or songs to sample. You're going to have to put the effort in to get to a record store, so you might not have one that's close to you. You might have to travel quite a long distance, and then you're going to have to sit and sift through loads and loads of crates. Now, obviously, some people absolutely love doing this, and I've had fun doing it as well in the past, but it is very time consuming, and you're not always guaranteed to find a sample either. So it can be a bit of an annoyance. Say you get inspiration and then the next thing you really want to make a beat, but you have to get new vinyl, so you have to travel to go and get it. So it can kind of crush that inspiration, and it does take up a lot of time. So that's definitely the first thing I would say about is a negative about sampling from vinyl, is that it is going to take a bigger investment in time in order for you to get results. Secondly, and I think this is a really important point, is that if you want to sample from vinyl, you need a lot more gear. You need a turntable, and if that doesn't have amplification built in, then you will have to buy an amplifier or a DJ mixer in order to get that strong signal to your sampling device. I've got a Newmark Scratch PTO1, and luckily that's got an amp built in, so I can go directly from that to an SP, or I think it's even got USB as well, so I can sample directly into my computer via USB, which is really cool. But you are going to have to invest some money somewhere in order to be able to play vinyl and actually get it into a sampler. So bear that in mind if you are thinking of starting to sample vinyl. You are obviously going to need that equipment in order to be able to do that. With the rise of the Mark II now that that's hitting the shelves and people are managing to get hold of it, we only need to buy one thing, and that's a USB cable, and we're ready to sample out of our computer for as long as we want. So there's a much smaller cost in sampling digitally, and there's going to be a much bigger cost in terms of investing in equipment if you want to sample from vinyl. So that's definitely something that you should consider. Another big point about vinyl is that when you start collecting records and you get to 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 records, you're going to have to appreciate that that's going to take up a lot of room wherever it is that you are keeping these. So not all of us are fortunate to live in palaces, myself included. Here in the UK, I live in what's called, or is what is known as a 2 up, 2 down. So that means I've got 2 rooms downstairs, living room, kitchen. Upstairs is 2 bedrooms, one of which is this studio here. So I don't have an awful lot of room to be storing hundreds and hundreds of vinyls to dig through. One day, hopefully, I will have the space to do that, and that would be really, really nice. But for now, digital sampling is just much more convenient for me because I don't really have that much space to store vinyl. So that is something that you really need to consider if you want to get into vinyl sampling, bearing in mind that one record might only give you one sample. So imagine every song that you've ever sampled digitally, imagine having that physically in a room somewhere. It takes up a lot of room. So you're going to need dedicated storage, and it needs to be upright as well, so obviously there's no damage to the vinyl, that it doesn't bend or warp or anything.
Looks as if you're reorganizing your records.
Yeah.
Was chronological?
No.
Not alphabetical.
Nope. Autobiographical.
No fucking way.
So there's a lot of things that you need to consider in regards to storage before you start on the path of sampling from vinyl. One thing that you could do to get around that, which is something that I've done in the past, is just have only a certain amount of vinyl at any one time. So you could have 30 records, and then you could sell them back to a record shop and buy another 30 and keep a rotation going. That's one way to keep your collection fresh but not take up any more room. But yeah, other than that, you're probably going to have to move to a bigger house in order to have a bigger collection. So that's definitely going to be an annoyance. Okay, so we mentioned about equipment being expensive a little bit earlier, but vinyl itself can get expensive as well, especially compared to YouTube, where pretty much you have access to anything for free. So that is another thing that you need to bear in mind, is that if you start collecting vinyl, those things are going to cost money. Even if you dig in the bargain crates at record shops, it still adds up once you start forming a bit of a collection of vinyl. So be really careful about how much you're spending. In the UK, it's really hard to find records now for under sort of £3 or £4. So if you're thinking £3 or £4 per every sample that you want to use, imagine if you spend that money on everything you've sampled digitally, it's going to be very, very expensive. So the alternative, obviously, with digital, you could just buy a Spotify subscription, which is £14 a month, and you have access to nearly unlimited music. And then you've got YouTube as well, which of course is absolutely free to sample from. So there is a massive argument there that vinyl can be expensive. Like I say, I appreciate you can find them in bargain bins and things like that, but it does add up very quickly when you start buying a lot of them. Okay, so I think that's everything that I wanted to mention. I hope this gives you a bit of a better idea of what it's like to own vinyl and sample from vinyl. And there are loads of alternatives out there now digitally digitally. And what I will say before the end of this video is that there's no judgment from me whatsoever, and I'm sure a lot of people in the beatmaking community now are the same way, that things are modernizing, and with the access to so many tracks digitally now to be able to sample, it's just ridiculous to ignore that library of music that we've got access to, and the portability of it all as well. I think that is something that I probably should have mentioned about vinyl as well. Obviously, if you want to go somewhere and make beats, you can't really sample and take vinyl with you and a whole turntable setup and everything. Say you're on holiday, it's so much more convenient just to be able to hook up to Wi-Fi or use your cellular data, and there you go, you have access to be able to make beats. So I don't think you should worry about any judgment whatsoever. If you're someone that just samples digitally, that's absolutely fine in my opinion. If you're someone that just samples vinyl, that's awesome, and it's a really good way to go about things. But I think a happy medium for me is personally where I'm at. So I like to sample from vinyl now and again, but the majority of the time I will sample digitally, and I don't feel at all ashamed about it. I think the main thing about all this really is that as long as you're making beats, that's a good thing, that's a positive thing. So that's the thing that you should be concentrating on instead of where you get your sources from. And like I mentioned a bit earlier as well, those purists definitely sample digitally at some point or another, so don't worry about what they say to you online. Do what works for you and just make beats, and that's the most important thing. Okay guys, so I'm signing off for this one. I hope this was informative. I hope it helps you out if you're new to the vinyl world, and I hope it gives you some reassurance if you're someone that likes sampling digitally. It's not all bad news. I think there are a lot of positives for sampling digitally. So until next time guys, whether you're using vinyl or digital to sample, just keep making beats, and I will be back with more content very soon. Peace!